The sun was weak in the sky, its light barely reaching the cracked soil of the alien village. The land looked dry and broken, like it had given up long ago. Houses stood half-fallen, their walls made of stone and clay, dust covering everything. The air was heavy with silence, not the silence of peace, but the silence of despair. Mothers held their children close, trying to quiet their cries, but the little ones were too hungry. Their stomachs made painful sounds. Their lips were dry. Their eyes looked dull, as if life itself was slipping away. In the corners of the village, old men sat with empty bowls staring at nothing. Their faces showed the truth. No food, no hope. The market square, once full of life, was now only broken stalls and rotting wood. A few alien traders passed by, but they had nothing to sell. The crops had died seasons ago. The rivers had dried and no hunters returned with meat. Hunger had become the cruel ruler of the village. Every day, the people asked the same question, whispered like a prayer. How much longer can we survive? That evening, a small group of children gathered near the edge of the village. They watched the horizon with tired eyes, hoping for something, anything. Suddenly, they saw a figure walking slowly along the path. At first, they thought it was another trader, but as the figure came closer, they gasped. It was not an alien, it was a boy, a human boy. His clothes were torn, his hands dirty, and on his back he carried a strange bag full of junk. Old cans, wires, broken glass, and pieces of scrap metal clinked together as he walked. He looked weak, but his eyes burned with something the villagers had not seen in a long time. Determination. The children ran to tell the elders. Soon the whole village gathered. Standing in silence as the boy walked into the square, the elders looked at him with suspicion. One of them stepped forward, his voice cold. "Human, why have you come here? There is nothing for you. Only death waits in this place." The boy set his bag down. His voice was calm but strong. "I did not come for trade. I did not come to take. I came to give." The villagers laughed bitterly. How could a boy with nothing but garbage give anything? Another elder sneered. "Do you mock us? Look around. The soil is dead. The water is gone. Even the sky has abandoned us." But the boy did not move. He looked at the crowd, his eyes resting on the starving children. "From this," he said, lifting a broken piece of metal, "I will give you food. From trash, I will bring you life." The crowd gasped. Some shouted in anger, calling him a "her." Others shook their heads, thinking he was mad. Only the children kept staring at him with hope in their eyes. The boy did not argue. He only opened his bag and began pulling out scraps. He laid them on the ground. Wires, cans, glass, and strange objects the villagers had never seen. His hands moved quickly, shaping something from the chaos. Night fell. The villagers returned to their homes, but many kept peeking through broken doors, watching the strange boy work under the dim light of a lantern. He worked in silence, his face full of focus. The next morning, the people gathered again. Some expected to see the boy gone. Others thought he would be dead, but he was still there, tired but smiling. Around him lay a strange little device built from garbage. "What is this toy?" An elder spat. "Do you think a machine made of trash will save us?" The boy only whispered, "Wait and see." The crowd grew restless. Mothers held their crying children. The air felt heavy with both anger and fragile hope. The boy stood tall against them all, his voice clear. "You think this is garbage? But to me it is life, and I will show you." The people did not believe him, yet none could look away. Something about the boy, about his quiet confidence, pulled them closer. The starving village stood in silence, waiting to see if the human's promise was madness, or a miracle about to be born. The village was awake early. Whispers carried through broken streets. The human boy had spent the night building with scraps, and everyone wanted to know what foolish thing he had made. Mothers pulled their children close, while the elders gathered. Near the center, their faces were hard, but behind their eyes was a question they could not hide. Could this stranger really help? The boy stood near his strange device. His hair was messy, his clothes covered in dirt, but his eyes shone with a quiet fire. Around him lay pieces of metal bent into shapes, cans cut open, wires tied together in ways no alien had seen before. The machine was not beautiful, but it was alive with potential. One of the elders stepped forward, his voice sharp. "Human, you waste your strength. This land is cursed. The gods have abandoned us. What can you do with trash that the stars themselves could not do?" The boy looked at him calmly, then at the crowd. "I will not argue with you, I will only show you. From garbage I will make food. From what you throw away I will bring water and life." A murmur spread through the crowd. Some laughed bitterly, others shook their heads. Only the children looked at him with eyes wide open, desperate to believe. A little girl stepped closer, her voice small but trembling. "Is it true, human? Can you really give us food?" The boy knelt down and looked at her, his voice softened. "Yes, but I will need time. I will need patience, and I will need trust." The girl's mother pulled her back quickly. "Do not listen, child. His words are sweet but empty. We cannot live on promises." But the girl did not stop staring at the boy, and in her eyes there was something that even the elders could not silence. Hope. The boy lifted his strange device and placed it on the dead soil near the square. He poured a handful of black dust and scraps into it, then pulled a small lever. The machine rattled and hissed. Smoke rose, and for a moment the crowd thought it would break apart. Then, slowly, a trickle of clear water began to drip from the end of a pipe. It fell into the dirt, darkening the dry ground. The villagers gasped. It was not much, only a few drops, but to them it was as if the desert itself had spoken. The elders leaned forward, their disbelief cracking for a heartbeat. But then one of them growled, "It is a trick. Water is water, but it cannot feed us. Show us food or stop wasting our time." The boy did not answer. He simply picked up a small seed from his pocket, a seed he had saved during his long travels. He placed it into the wet soil and carefully adjusted the machine to keep dripping. The crowd leaned in, breath held, but nothing happened. The seed sat in silence, unmoving. The elders laughed, their voices bitter. "You see, nothing changes. You are only a child playing with scraps. Leave before we lose our patience." But the boy did not move. He stayed by the seed, his eyes steady. His voice rose clear above the laughter. "From this soil, dead as it may seem, I will bring life. If you cannot wait a day, then wait a night. If not a night, then wait a week. But know this, I will not stop, not until this seed grows." The crowd fell silent. His words carried weight, not the weight of power, but the weight of someone who truly believed. For the first time in many seasons, the villagers heard a voice that did not sound like surrender. The children whispered among themselves, "What if it works? What if the human is right?" They watched the boy with wide eyes as if he carried the last flame in a dark world. The elders pulled back, angry but unsure. They could not deny the water, they could not deny the strange machine, yet they did not want to look foolish by believing. As night fell again, the boy sat beside his little machine, feeding it scraps, repairing its shaking parts. His face glowed in the faint light, and his hands never stopped working. The villagers watched from their doors, torn between doubt and hope. By the second morning, some of the children sneaked food to him, small pieces of bread they had saved. They placed it near his side and whispered, "Do not give up, human, we believe you." The boy smiled for the first time. His voice was quiet, almost a promise to himself as much as to them. "I will not give up. This village will eat again, and it will rise again. I swear it." And as the sun rose, the villagers could not look away. The boy had nothing but garbage, yet in his hands, garbage had become hope. The village woke to a strange sound. It was not the cry of hunger nor the wind over empty roofs. It was the steady clank of metal and the hiss of steam. The human boy was working again, his hands black with soot, his face shining with sweat. Around him, the pile of garbage had grown smaller, piece by piece turning into parts of his strange machine. The elders stood at a distance, arms crossed, eyes cold. They whispered that he was wasting their time. They said a human child could not save a dying world, but the children gathered close, sitting in the dirt, watching him like he was performing magic. The boy took the little seed he had planted the day before and checked the soil. It was still damp from the trickle of water his machine gave. He adjusted the pipes, tightened the wires, and poured more scraps into the device. The villagers saw fire sparks dance, smoke curl up, and water drip again, clear and shining like jewels in the dust. For a long time, nothing happened. The seed was just a seed, silent and small. The elders mocked him. Look, nothing grows. He plays with fire and trash while our children starve. But the boy ignored their voices. He whispered to the seed as if it could hear him, "Grow, little one, grow and prove them wrong." His voice was soft but filled with will. Hours passed. The sun climbed high, and still the boy worked. His hands bled from sharp edges, but he did not stop. At last, one of the children gasped, pointing at the soil. "Look, look!" A tiny green sprout pushed through the dirt, fragile but alive. The villagers froze, their breath caught in their throats. It was small, weaker than a finger, but it was life. Life where no life had been. The mothers cried softly, the children smiled, and even the elders leaned closer, though. They tried to hide their shock. One of them whispered, "It cannot be, the soil is cursed, nothing grows here." But the proof was before their eyes. A little green sprout waving gently in the dry wind. The boy sat back, his chest rising and falling with exhaustion, yet his eyes glowed with triumph. "This is only the beginning," he said. "One sprout will become many, and many will become a garden." The children clapped their hands, cheering. Their laughter filled the air, a sound the village had not heard in years. The elders frowned, but they could not deny what stood in the soil. Still, doubt did not die easily. One elder stepped forward, his voice sharp. "A sprout will not feed a village. You waste time. You play with hope like it is a toy. When the plant dies, the people will break. Do you wish to crush them further?" The boy looked at him calmly. "The plant will not die. I will protect it, and I will build more. This is only the first experiment." He turned back to his machine, adding more pieces, changing the flow of water, making it stronger. The scraps rattled and clinked, sparks flew, smoke rose, but the machine lived. It kept feeding the soil. The children helped him now, bringing more broken objects they found, old pots, shattered tools, pieces of wood. They placed them beside him proudly, calling it treasure, not trash. By nightfall, the sprout had grown taller, its leaves unfolding under the dim light. The villagers stood in silence, unable to look away. Something had changed in the air, something small but powerful, yet not all were pleased. In the shadows, a few muttered darkly, "If the human succeeds, he will control us, he will make us. Depend on him. We should end this before it spreads." Their eyes were sharp with fear. The boy knew they doubted him, but he did not stop. He looked at the green sprout, and a small smile touched his lips. "You are proof, little one," he whispered. "From garbage, life can rise." The night grew cold, but the village no longer felt only hopeless. In the heart of the square, where there had once been only dust and despair, a fragile plant stood tall. It was not enough to feed a village, not yet. But it was enough to awaken something far greater. A question, a dream, a spark. What if this boy was right? What if garbage could truly become life? And in that single thought, hope began to return to the hungry village. The sprout stood in the center of the square, small and fragile, yet it drew every eye. By the second morning, its leaves were brighter, and the soil around it looked less dead. For the first time in many seasons, the villagers felt a shift, not in the land, but in their hearts. But hope is dangerous, and not all welcomed it. The elders gathered in the council house, their voices low and sharp. They had watched the boy's strange machine drip water. They had seen the green sprout rise, but they could not let themselves believe. One elder slammed his fist on the table. "This is a trick. If we allow the people to trust him, and he fails, their last strength will break." Another shook his head. "Already the children sing his name. Already the mothers look to him with eyes of faith. If the plant dies, they will curse us for doubting. We cannot let this continue. The oldest elder leaned back, his eyes narrow. Hope is more dangerous than hunger. Hunger makes people weak, but hope can make them rebel. If the human gains their hearts, we lose control. While they spoke, in secret outside in the square, the children were bringing the boy scraps of metal and wood. They laughed as he took each piece, calling it treasure. Their thin arms carried broken pots, old nails, and even shattered toys. The boy thanked them, all, and with each gift his strange machine grew stronger. The mothers began to watch closely, their hearts torn between fear and belief. One whispered, "He is only a boy, yet he works harder than our strongest hunters did." Another said softly, "He may be the answer the stars refused to send us." But doubt lingered. The elders stepped out into the crowd, their voices like knives. "Look at him," one shouted. "He plays with your hope. A single sprout will not feed you. What will you do when it withers? What will you do when hunger takes your children again?" The crowd grew quiet. Fear pressed against hope. The villagers shifted uneasily. Some looked down, ashamed to dream. Others clung to the sight of the sprout, as if it were a lifeline. The boy stood before them, his clothes torn, his hands cut, his eyes dark from exhaustion, yet he did not step back. He raised his voice so all could hear. "You fear I will fail. You fear this sprout will die. But no, this I will not stop. Even if this one falls, I will plant 10 more. Even if they fall, I will plant 100. I will not rest until this land breathes again." His words cut through the silence. The children cheered, their little voices rising against the weight of doubt. The elders scowled, but their power seemed thinner than before. That night, the village was restless. Some whispered in secret corners, "Should we trust the human or drive him out?" A few even spoke darker words. "If he leaves alive, he may return with more humans, stronger ones. Then what place will we have?" Group of angry men gathered near the square, their faces hard. They watched the boy as he worked under the dim lantern, his back bent, his hands never still. One of the men muttered, "He brings danger. We should end this now." But before they could move closer, the children appeared. They formed a circle around the boy, their small hands linked, their eyes shining in the lantern glow. One of them said loudly, "If you touch him, you touch us." The men froze, anger burning in their eyes, but something in the children's courage held them back. They spat on the ground and walked away, but their threat lingered in the air. The boy looked up at the children and gave a tired smile. "You should be resting," he whispered. But they shook their heads. "We will guard you, human. We believe in you." That night, as the stars watched from above, the boy continued his work. Every spark from his machine was like a firefly. In the darkness, the children stayed close, their small bodies keeping him safe. In the council house, the elders whispered again, their fear deepening. "If the people stand with him, we lose our rule." One growled, another hissed. "Then we must act soon before it is too late." And so the village stood at the edge of two paths, one of hope, fragile but glowing, and one of fear. Sharp and ready to strike, the sprout was alive. The machine was alive, and the boy's promise was alive. But shadows were gathering, and not all wished to see his miracle grow. The dawn came with a soft light. The villagers stepped out of their broken homes, expecting only another day of hunger. But what they saw in the square stopped them in their tracks. The single sprout had grown taller. Its leaves were wider, greener, brighter than anything the village had seen in years. Around the sprout, the soil looked different, no longer gray and lifeless. It was darker, damp, and alive. The boy's strange machine hummed beside it, dripping water, feeding the ground. The children were already there, clapping their hands, pointing at the change. One child shouted, "Look, it is bigger, it is alive." The mothers gasped, holding their little ones closer, their eyes wet with disbelief. The elders exchanged uneasy glances. The sprout should have withered in the night, but it had not. It had grown. The boy stood beside the plant, his eyes tired but glowing with quiet pride. "This is only the beginning," he said. His voice was steady. "If one seed can grow, then many can grow, and if many can grow, you will never starve again." He reached into his bag and pulled out more seeds. They were small, nothing special to look at, but to the villagers they looked like stars in his hands. He planted them in the soil around the sprout, then adjusted the machine. The pipes hissed, the gears rattled, and more water trickled into the ground. The crowd leaned closer, holding their breath. At first, there was only silence. Then slowly more tiny sprouts broke through the soil, one after another. The people cried out in shock. Some fell to their knees, covering their mouths with trembling hands. Children ran forward to touch the new leaves. Their laughter echoing through the village. It was a miracle. Life had returned to dead ground, but not everyone smiled. The elders frowned deeply. Their fear grew heavier. One muttered, "If this continues, the people will no longer listen to us. They will listen only to him." Still the garden grew. Day by day the boy worked, repairing his machine, feeding it scraps, building more devices from garbage. Soon, water channels stretched across the square, carrying life into the soil. Strange glowing plants sprouted, stronger and faster than ordinary crops. Their leaves sparkled in the sunlight, their stems thick and healthy. The villagers gathered daily, bringing whatever they had to help. Old pots became water containers. Broken glass became filters. Even shattered weapons were reshaped into tools. The boy showed them how to use it. All his hands taught, his voice guided, and so the village changed. The square that had been a place of despair now burst with green. A garden spread where only dust had lived. Mothers began to smile again. Children ran with food in their hands. The sound of joy replaced the silence of hunger, but joy always calls envy. One night, while the village celebrated the first harvest of glowing leaves, shadows crept near. A group of angry men whispered in the dark, "This human makes us weak. He makes us believe we need him. What happens when he leaves? What happens when his kind returns to claim us?" They carried stones, ready to smash the machines, ready to kill the boy. But the children had not forgotten their promise. They stayed near the garden every night, guarding it like a treasure. When the men moved forward, the children shouted, "Stop!" Their cries woke the mothers, who rushed out and stood between the boy and the men. The men lowered their stones, their anger breaking against the courage of women and children. They spat on the ground and walked away, muttering, "This is not the end." The boy, who had been asleep by the machine, woke to see the villagers protecting him. For the first time, the elders saw something that shook them more than the growing plants. They saw unity. The people, once broken and silent, now stood together. The boy placed his hand on the soil, feeling the strength of the roots below. "This garden will not fall," he whispered, "not while I breathe." By the end of the week, the square was unrecognizable. A field of green stretched where there had been only dust. The garden fed the children, the mothers, the old, and even the doubting elders. The air was filled with the smell of life. The miracle had come from garbage. The boy had kept his promise. Yet beyond the green leaves, danger still stirred, for not everyone wished to see this miracle survive. The garden had become the heart of the village. Every morning the people gathered to see the glowing plants, to touch the leaves, to taste the food. The air no longer carried only the sound of hunger, but of laughter, of life. The human boy had given them hope, and the garden was the proof. But hope is always tested. On the seventh night, dark clouds gathered above the valley. The wind rose like a beast, carrying dust and broken branches across the land. The villagers watched the sky with fear. They knew storms, and storms were cruel. A storm could destroy in moments what had taken weeks to grow. The boy stood in the square, his eyes fixed on the clouds. His machine rattled in the rising wind, the pipes shaking, the wires snapping loose. He ran to tighten them, his hands moving fast. The elders shouted, "It will all be washed away. We told you this was foolish." The rain began with heavy drops, then came harder, slamming into the soil. The garden bent under the weight of water, fragile stems breaking. The villagers cried out, Mothers grabbed their children and ran for shelter, but many could not turn their eyes away from the garden, their only hope. The boy shouted above the storm, "Help me, if you want this garden to live. Stand with me." For a moment no one moved. The elders turned away, shaking their heads, but the children rushed forward first. Their small hands held the plants, covering them with broken pots and pieces of wood. Then the mothers came, their faces wet with rain and tears. They pressed stones around the soil to stop the water from washing it away. The boy worked without rest, fixing his machine. His fingers bled as he tied wires and hammered scraps into place. Lightning flashed above, thunder roared. The storm tore at his body, but he did not let go. One of the elders shouted from a doorway, "Leave it, human, you will die for nothing." But the boy only answered with a cry, "If the garden dies, the village dies, I will not stop." The water rose higher, flooding the square. The plants trembled, their glowing leaves bending low. The boy dragged pieces of metal to build a barrier. The villagers joined him now, pushing stones, lifting wood. Their feet sank into mud, their bodies cold. But they fought beside him. Hour after hour, they battled the storm. The garden was no longer only the boys', it had become theirs too. The children's voices shouted through the rain, "Save it! Save our food!" Their cries gave the adults strength. At last, as dawn approached, the storm began to weaken. The rain slowed, the wind softened, the clouds broke apart, and the first light of the sun touched the soaked village. The people looked at the square with fear. Was the garden destroyed? But then they saw it. Though bent and broken, many plants still stood. Their roots held strong, the soil, dark and rich. From the storm seemed even more alive. The machine still hummed faintly, dripping water. It had survived. The villagers gasped in relief. Some fell to their knees, whispering prayers. The children cheered, splashing in the mud. The mothers wept openly, hugging one another. The boy collapsed to the ground, his body shaking with exhaustion. His clothes torn, his skin cut, but his eyes glowed with triumph. He whispered through heavy breaths, "The garden lives, it will always live." The elders came forward slowly, their faces pale. They had doubted him, mocked him, even plotted against him. Yet the boy had done what none of them could. He had faced the storm and saved their future. One elder lowered his head, his voice low. "Perhaps we were wrong. Perhaps the human was sent to us not as a curse but as a blessing." The boy said nothing. He only reached out to touch the wet soil, feeling the strength beneath his palm. That day, the villagers worked together to repair what was broken. They built stronger barriers, fixed the machines, replanted where the storm had struck hardest. No longer did they see garbage as waste. Every broken piece was a tool, every scrap a gift. The garden grew brighter in the days that followed, stronger than before. The storm had tested it, and it had survived. The villagers' hearts grew stronger too. For the first time they knew the truth. If they stood together, nothing could take their hope again, but deep in the shadows, there were still whispers. Whispers of those who feared change, of those who feared the power of the boy. The storm had passed, but another test was coming. One that would not come from the sky, but from within the hearts of the people themselves. The storm had passed, but its memory lingered. Broken roofs and fallen trees marked the village. Mud covered the paths, and the air smelled of wet earth. Yet in the center of the square the garden stood tall, bruised but alive. Its glowing leaves shimmered in the morning light, proof that life had survived. The people gathered slowly. Their eyes were wide with wonder. The garden had endured what they thought was impossible. It had faced the storm and lived. And because of it, they had lived too. The children ran first, laughing, touching the wet leaves. They pulled fruits from the stems, juicy and sweet. Their voices filled the air with joy. Mothers followed, their hands trembling as they held food once again. They shared it with the old, with the weak, with those who had nearly given up. The boy watched from the edge of the square, his body still weak from the night's battle. His clothes torn, his arms scratched, but his spirit unbroken. His eyes shone with quiet pride as he saw the villagers eat. One of the elders stepped forward, his voice heavy. "Human boy, we mocked you, we doubted you, we even cursed you. Yet you did not leave. You gave us this garden, this gift of life. For that, we owe you more than we can ever repay." The boy shook his head, his voice calm. "You owe me nothing. I only gave you what you already had. You had land, you had hands, you had hope hidden deep inside. All I did was show you how to use it. Even garbage can become treasure. Even waste can grow life, or not." Words struck the villagers deeply. They looked at the garden again, but this time they did not see a miracle from the sky. They saw their own strength, their own unity. From that day, the village changed. No longer did they throw scraps away. No longer did they see broken tools as useless. With the boys' guidance, they built more machines, small and simple, made from trash. Together they turned garbage into water, into soil, into food. The square became a place of color. Green vines climbed the walls, fruits hung from branches, flowers bloomed where there had once been dust. The air was filled with the smell of life. The laughter of children echoed through every street, but the greatest change was in the hearts of the people. They no longer walked with their heads low. They no longer whispered prayers of despair. They spoke with courage. They dreamed again, one evening. As the sun set and painted the sky red, the villagers gathered in the square. They lit fires not to keep away the dark, but to celebrate. They sang songs of thanks. They danced. The children placed flowers in the boy's hands, calling him savior. The boy only smiled, his voice soft. "I am not a savior. I am only a builder. Remember this, what I gave you, you can give to others. What I taught you, you can teach. Do not let the garden be the end. Let it be the beginning." The elders bowed their heads. At last they too understood. One of them said, "You are young, human, but your heart is older than ours. You did not conquer us with power. You healed us with hope. For that, we will remember you always." That night, the village slept not in fear, but in peace. Their stomachs were full, their spirits strong, their future bright. And so it was said that from garbage came life. From scraps and broken things came a new beginning. A human boy had walked into a dying village with nothing but trash and left them with a garden, a miracle, a future. The villagers would tell the story for generations. They would say, "When we were starving, a boy came. He showed us that even the smallest seed can grow, even the weakest hands can build, and even from garbage, life can rise." The boy stood alone in the square before he left, his eyes on the garden. His hand brushing the glowing leaves, he whispered, "This is not the end. There are more villages, more people waiting. I will not stop." And with his bag of scraps on his back, he walked down the road, leaving behind a garden, leaving behind hope, leaving behind a truth that would never be forgotten. From garbage, life,